So, Jamie.
Fred.
Tell me, why do you make music?
We've started with the big one.
Yeah.
I guess for a bunch of reasons, probably. First, I would say that I write it because it helps me to understand myself better.
Mm-hmm.
That's and also I enjoy it. And that's definitely how I started. Those are the reasons I started making music. But the reason I still make music at the tender age of 35 is that I believe that music has a social function, and that good songs, when they work, help other people to understand themselves better.
Mm-hmm.
And I've often thought about giving up music and not making music and doing something that's more useful. And I had to really think about why to carry on doing it. And I was really lucky to receive some really good feedback from listeners and people who tell me that my music has really helped them.
Yeah.
And that I dug into that a bit more and spoke to other songwriters and other musicians, and I realized that I couldn't do it if I didn't think that there was a social function to what I do. So I'm not an altruist. I love it. I get a lot from it. It's my joy and my passion as well as else. But the reason it's also my vocation is because I believe that my music is useful and can be helpful for people. So I think of it as like something that I offer to listeners, and if it's something that you need right now and it can be helpful, then you'll meet it halfway, and if it's not, then that's okay.
Yeah. So you think kind of music for music's sake is problematic, or maybe even
not at all
selfish?
Not at all. No. That's like
I mean, you're perfectly entitled to.
Sure.
It
No.
particularly...
No. Absolutely. I think music's music and art is a wonderful, beautiful, important part of the human condition. I spent a lot of time, I have spent a lot of time working, using music, teaching people music, sharing music in workshop settings or with people with really profound learning difficulties and things, where it is music for music's sake, for them, and I also know I encourage people to play music for themselves and for the sheer joy of making sound. But for me, because what I do, I find really hard. I find making music really, really difficult.
Why do you think that is?
Because I have high expectations of myself, unrealistically so. But that sounds egotistical. I don't mean that I'm, it's hard because I want it to be so amazing. I do, and that contributes to it. But I find it hard because, I have a very strong inner critic, and, I find I spend a lot of time battling with and working out tools and ways to keep on making music when, I have a lot of self-doubt and that tells me that I should leave it to people who are much better at it, like you, to be perfectly honest.
You've played with lots of great musicians,
yeah.
For a long time. So in what way is that helpful, and in what way is that kind of, it sounds like it's sort of suffocating in a way, or it causes doubt, but it must be amazing.
Yes and no.
It must be amazing as well.
Yeah,
right?
for sure. Like all these things, it's double-edged, right? So it's it's very, one of the things I think about a lot is that I look around at my colleagues, basically people with whom I get to work and play and create and record or whatever, and some of them are my idols. I love them, and I love their music. I love what they stand for as humans, and I feel in my quiet moments that says a lot about me too. They want to play with me. It's very validating.
Yeah.
On the other hand, I've spent a lot of my career in rehearsal rooms and recording studios feeling like I'm the least good musician in the room. And the only thing that's got me through that was one, dropping being defensive about not being good at something. And
was that a conscious decision?
Yeah, it was conscious because the defensiveness wasn't helping.
Sure.
And like,
when was that? Is it like, it sounds like it was a bit of a kind of eureka moment, or not? Was it gradual?
Yeah, no, well, it wasn't a eureka moment. Not exactly. I mean, like, we went to school together. But then you went and studied music at music college, and that became a different thing. And I did it. I went and did a philosophy degree and kept on pursuing music in a non-formal setting. And
reggae.
Exactly. Then coming back to us playing together, but with your new friends from music college.
Right.
And then that was amazing, but also very challenging because I was just very conscious of what I didn't know around people who did.
Yeah.
And I think I spent a long time sort of not grasping the opportunity to learn by being self-conscious and embarrassed about not knowing something. So not saying it, not saying I don't know what that means.
Yeah, right.
And so as a teacher now, that's one of the things I try to dispel, encourage at the get-go, which is like, be greedy for information,
for knowledge, yeah.
And like, it's cool. So I think it was through some of that process and realizing that actually learning was something I wanted to do, and then taking that on myself and doing that.
It's so nice when you meet somebody or play with somebody that kind of knows a lot of stuff but just isn't defensive and is kind of willing to show all their weaknesses and stuff. It's quite rare, and like we're all defensive to different levels.
Absolutely.
And it's definitely something to just throw.
It's all about trust as well, and it takes a long time to.
Yeah.
Music is an extremely emotional thing that we do, and music and rehearsal settings are very emotional settings, and I think. So I think dropping that defensiveness and getting hungry to learn and improve and. Has been really good. So playing with other musicians, particularly musicians who I think are amazing, whether it's people who play in my band now, like Matt Robinson or Chris Hyson, Dave Hamblett, you. My wife's an amazing musician. Geez, like I just feel that I feel I've got so much to learn, but that's made me a better teacher as well.
Yeah.
Because I've gone on the journey. I feel like I've gone on a journey that lots of young musicians who, for whatever reason, weren't already amazing when they were 18, like they didn't do that work or they didn't whatever.
Yeah.
And trying to be like, it's cool. It doesn't matter when you start.
Yeah.
Like, why don't we just park the fact that you're stressed about not knowing what that means, and then let's start, and we'll start today.
And it's worth looking at, history is full of examples of late starters who then went on to do incredible things. So
big time.
It's not difficult to find that. I mean, one of the things that people, all these kind of musician types that you're describing, obviously it's nice for you that they want to play with you, but of course it's you give them back just as much as you receive, and certainly a lot of that is to do with songwriting and writing lyrics, something that people who go to music college probably aren't very good at, and probably on the whole, I'm generalizing here massively, aren't especially instinctively interested in or drawn to. So let's talk about lyrics.
Sure.
I'll just read one of your lyrics. This is just taken at random because I just want to speak about style and the space between poetry on the one hand, which a song isn't really, let's face it, and just chatting, which nor is it that. So this is from your song Harvest Moon. It says, it's from the death of innocence that true love can be born, and if not now, then someday soon, beneath a harvest moon. Tell me about that space between poetry and everyday speech.
Well, it's quite a big one to begin with.
Yeah.
People write lyrics in all sorts of different ways, and I guess if at its root, what I think a lot of lyrics do is try to find ways to say more than you have time to say, right? We're reducing, through the sheer number of words, we're reducing the number of words to say something really big. That's why we use metaphor. It's why we use analogies and similes and all these other poetic devices.
That sounds like it's poetry.
Sure. I mean, so a lot of the devices we use, like, and lyricists use, are the same as the devices people use in written poetry.
Yeah.
And a lot of lyrics are poetic.
Of course.
For me, the difference is one of intention. That poems, whether if they're intended to be read, as opposed to lyrics which are intended to be heard. They're intended to be sung and heard as in a sung form, as opposed to read off a page. And the rhythm of those two things is super different. It's not to say that you don't get fantastic, you don't have lyrics which read wonderfully off the page, and there are tons of great examples of people setting poetry to music in a very successful way. I like to think of them as being separate, just because the intention is so different, and because the kind of metrical devices or meters or in general poetic tools that people use when they're writing words to be read are often quite different than people writing words to be sung.
Yeah.
And that I wouldn't ever encourage lyricists to be bound by what their lyrics look like on the page, because like one of my big loves is folk music, where a lot of it's wildly asymmetric, and in ways that a lot of traditional poetry styles would not allow for. And that's what I love about sort of non-rhyming lyrics, or lyrics which where the syllable patterns don't. And so if you just read it, it wouldn't make sense. You wouldn't get where the stresses are, because it's not obvious in a way that a poem you're meant to read should be clear. That's why we lay it out like that.
Yeah, but what is there somewhere in between then that's like that is poetry, but it's not meant to be read off a page? It's just meant to be recited from memory out loud.
Absolutely.
And how close is that to a song?
Well, I mean, I'm sure there is melody in speech. I mean, and there's lots of melodic traditions which start as spoken traditions, oral traditions. Any kind of performative oral tradition has melody inside it, and rhythm as a key part of it. And so I think without knowing a huge amount about what I'm about to say, I'm going to plow on anyway. Lyric traditions of grand lyric poetry will have lots in common with certain kinds of a cappella singing. And for example, the way a lot of folk songs get created or got created was people wrote broadsides. They wrote in sort of bad rhyming couplets some story which has just happened as a kind of a passing on some information that someone then set to a traditional tune that everyone knew. And so there's lots of crossover in music. I think nowadays, and there are plenty of musicians. I mean, I think of Leonard Cohen as someone who started out as a poet and then transitioned into seeing himself more as a songwriter. And it's definitely one of the things people do these days is to, if you're of a certain kind of singer-songwriter, if you can get your lyrics released by Faber and Faber as a kind of collected edition, then
you're serious.
You've made it.
I mean,
validated.
One of the things that musicians who, let's say instrumentalists, and I'm sort of half directing this at myself, because this is something I've had to work on and struggled with a little bit, and I kind of deliberately made an effort to really get into poetry a while back in order to try and improve this. But a lot of instrumentalists don't give a shit about lyrics. Let's face it. People who let's say they're jazz musicians or classical musicians or folk musicians are different, I would say. But what would you say to people who don't really listen to words? What would you say to them? What are they missing? I mean, it's an obvious question, but actually for a lot of people it's not that obvious.
Yeah, I mean, you're missing a third of the information, right? If you think about from a publishing point of view, the core things we're talking about are melody, harmony, and lyrics. So if you're the kind of person who just takes the melody and the harmony, as great as that is, and all the things you can do with that, and there's a whole world within that, but like you're leaving a third behind. And I would encourage anyone who wants to have a rich and full understanding of any work of art to engage with 100% of it rather than just 66% of it, right? Doesn't make sense.
So do you kind of have to fight this with, like, let's say your band members or people you play with, to try and get them to engage with that?
Yeah, I mean, I've taken to, before we rehearse a new song, or before I bring a new song to the band or to any musicians, is to tell them what the song's about.
Yeah.
Which is not something I do with audiences.
Yeah.
I don't tell audiences what the song is about before I play it.
Well, they don't need that, right?
A lot of people do though. A lot of performers like that. I don't do that because I like audiences to come to understand the song on their own terms.
Yeah.
Sometimes wildly different from what I intended. But with my band, it's important, or musicians I'm working with and with my songs, it's really important to me that they at least one time, like, get it from the horse's mouth.
Sure.
The fact that some of them still don't engage with it and are not that interested in it, I mean, that's up to them. And you can be an awesome bandmate and and you can play the music wonderfully and not know the lyrics. But I feel that you're missing out, and like, I can only think that your understanding of your role in the music would be greater if you also connected with the lyrical content of it. So
how do you emote, speaking about letting the audience decide what it means? How do you emote, and what devices do you use without kind of shoving stuff down people's throats in a really kind of obvious way, and also without making everything about like me?
Show, don't tell. I think, don't insult the audience's intelligence. Like, they can, if there are ways that you can say something really powerful without naming it. Naming it is fine too. But on that point about it being me, or being too personal, I think it's really important to say that audiences never hear the song as being about you. They hear it as being about them. So that you can write a song that it's as personal and as like feels raw and open and like pouring your heart out. And if you do it, if you do it well, like then you don't have to be afraid that no one's sitting in the audience thinking, "What the hell's that person talking about?" Like, "Geez, that's awkward." Like, if they connect with it, they're thinking, this is about me.
Yeah. And
it connects to something that's happening to my life around it. It might be wildly different. So I don't tell people that right now an enormous chunk of my songs are written about my dad. I have more latterly been talking about that, and he has Alzheimer's. I spend a lot of time helping to care for him, and so now I've kind of brought my fans more into that space. But generally speaking, I wouldn't do that because I know that there are people who'll find the songs and it'll mean something really personal to them about a completely different experience they're having, and that's really powerful. That's where the social function of music comes in, and lyrics comes in, because people project themselves into the song.
Yeah. So you don't think it's possible for songs to be too much, too autobiographical or too egotistical, let's say?
No, because there are just good songs and bad songs.
Right, so the reason someone might be annoying for that reason is just because it's not a good song, rather than it's because it's that.
Yeah, because we're fascinated by humans are interesting, right? If you just stood on stage for 15 minutes and did nothing, literally nothing,
it would still be interesting.
It would be fascinating, and and by the last couple of minutes, every tiny move you did would be of unbearable significance to the audience. So I think there's no amount of personal excavation, if you want to think that is too much. It's just how you do it. Right,
and that's sort of related to this space between that's poetical but that isn't poetry, where the style in which you say those incredibly personal things isn't too explicit or something like that. With sometimes, like, you really go for it, right? Sometimes you kind of put the knife in and be really explicit. But a lot of the time, your lyrics are kind of a little bit metaphorical or a little bit obscure, and that's enough. That's the reason I like them so much. That's enough to take kind of the edge off the autobiography, and that's a very personal thing to me. You know?
I think it's a conscious decision when I'm writing to try and not just describe. I'm not just trying to describe something. I'm trying to understand what it means to me. And sometimes it's the process of writing which helps me understand what it is. So I'm never just saying this is a thing that's happening.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think like, this is a thing that's happening, and what does that mean for me? Because it's the what does that mean for me which is the transferable bit for someone else. And I don't really write songs for me. I write songs as part of a conversation with someone else. And that's
your imaginary friend.
And that, exactly, my imaginary past. And that's why, and actually, it's when I write a new song or start a new song, I cannot wait to play it to someone, even if it's awful or it's very sad or it's no good. Like it doesn't exist until it's been played to someone else.
Ah, okay, that's interesting.
And it only has value for me in its relationship to someone else.
Not in itself.
Not for me.
Yeah. Fair enough.
And I mean, I just wrote I released an EP of piano music, which was the first piece of music I've released, which I did write for me.
Yeah.
And that was interesting. I really enjoyed it. But as a songwriter, I feel that it's not like I don't feel like it's some public duty that I'm doing, but that I don't, for me, the exciting bit about songwriting is the conversation.
The sharing,
Yeah.
How do you actually write songs? Like, do you have methods, or is there an element of chaos?
It's not super methodical, but it's no longer the kind of, will I be struck by this amazing
absolute hit,
this amazing music, like
inspiration.
Oh my God, someone give me a pen, I've got a napkin, here we go.
Like on a mountaintop.
Yeah, exactly.
Preferably.
Yeah. So, and people ask me how I write songs all the time, and I mean all the time, and so I've had to think about it, and essentially it starts by noodling.
Yeah.
Right. So non-goal orientated playing, which is increasingly rare, because I have, we all have lives, stuff to do, things to practice for, music to write for other people, teaching to do, dishes to wash, whatever. And so I don't often get tons and tons of time to play in a non-goal orientated way. I try to make it easier by doing a few sounding weird tips, like I leave my guitar lying around and not in its case.
Cunning ploy.
I leave the lid of the piano open. So and this sounds stupid, but it just means, and I will leave the guitar like on the kitchen table, so that I have to pick it up to move it in order to sit down and have dinner. And in the moving of it, I will probably play it for 5 minutes.
Split second
magic.
Flash.
The magic happens. So the noodling is a really important part of what I call like coming up with seeds. The most important thing is just is not editing in your head with the noodling process, just generating content.
That comes later, right?
Yeah. And the second and longest part of the process is crafting the seeds into something more substantial. And that's where, learning and craft and practice and experience comes. But I think the most important thing I think about in that sense is at every point that I think I need some new information for this song, I actually go back to the little idea I've already got and think, what more does it have to say? Because there's so much content in the little ideas we have that you don't need to you don't need a song that goes A, B, C, D, E, F, G form-wise. Although Weariest River is a good example of a song that starts in one place and it's going to be different.
Probably in quite a deliberate way, I guess, right?
Completely accidental.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the song came together from 3 different seeds
Okay.
that came together.
Our sense of taste, and we've kind of shared a lot of senses of taste for a long time. We've kind of both got into jazz at more or less the same time. You first.
I got you into jazz.
Yeah, and
cool. Thank me later, world.
And so I would say I've fought with my sense of taste a lot, but most of the time I have it quite clear what I like, what I find tasteful and what I find distasteful for all sorts of reasons. It's a bit distasteful to talk about taste. What's tasteful and distasteful, but nevertheless, I want to ask you, what kind of fights do you have with yourself about that?
Well, for a start, not tons.
Okay.
Because I think that in order to be really troubled by that kind of idea, you need to have developed quite strong ideas about what, in a genre. If we're talking about genre, it's like what is consonant within this particular genre or what's not. Whereas if you know less about what constitutes authentic sambo, or authentic ragtime piano style, or authentic vibrato for a 30s clarinet, whatever, then you have more choices to make about whether or not, for your particular piece of music, whether that is it, or if you
that sounds like an argument against knowledge, though.
But if you get, I guess it's an argument against being bogged down by bogus concepts of authenticity, which is false. It doesn't really, it's
that's a big topic.
It's very much in the eye of the beholder, right? What's authentic, what's not. Now, I would be the first person to defer to someone else's superior knowledge of a genre or cultural idiom, and not pretend to be an expert in it. And on the other hand, I have a pretty free-ranging, sort of magpie-like approach to being drawn to sounds that I like. Sure. And the challenge with taste, I guess, comes in if I'm taking things from different places, if I'm taking things from some harmonic language from some jazz, or I'm taking a more folk-like approach to singing a cappella, does this work? But I'm not thinking, does this work from the point of view of being an authentic singer-songwriter? Because what I do doesn't fit in with that. So therefore I don't have those sort of because I'm not worried about trying to be authentic to anything other than myself.
But I don't think authenticity is the same as a sense of taste. I agree with you basically on authenticity, that it's an impossible dream, it's a fantasy, and without an authentic audience, then you may as well not bother.
Sure.
But your sense of taste is a lot more intuitive than that. It's a lot more...
Sure, there are certain cliches that I would avoid in writing lyrics.
Yeah, and that extends to melody and harmony and everything.
Yes, and and now that I'm in a position of also teaching people, I have to you find yourself saying, what's happening here?
Yeah.
Rather than saying, this is rubbish. What the hell's going on here? Take this out. Brooks don't babble anymore. You're not, and or whatever. So
Brooks don't babble anymore.
I guess the thing is, these days, if I find myself at a musical decision, is this okay? Is this cheesy? Will this, not will this do, but can this work? Mm-hmm. Every time I put a major 7 chord in a song, I'm always major 7 chord. But is it is this okay?
Yeah.
Because the sound for my ears is just the cheesy chord.
Right. I've got a cheesy chord. But my cheesy chord is
or major 6
chord.
Can
I play it to you?
Yeah, sure.
My cheesy chord is that.
Nice.
Which is a bit more the same as yours. I cannot handle that chord.
Da da da.
Or yeah, anything that's...
Sounds like really Bud... really Bud Powell chords.
No, I love Bud Powell.
Yeah, but that's
Yeah, there's that chord. If it's in certain styles of jazz, I love it.
Yeah, context is... with all of this, context is king.
Totally.
And, one of the things I do a lot in my lyrics is is use idioms, like really popular idioms, which are idioms like little phrases that are common in every language that we use, like a stitch in time saves 9, or too big for your boots, or he's got a real poker face on tonight.
Sure.
Which are common in any kind of language, and it's different in different languages. And what's amazing about like idioms is that they tend to be give us access to like huge image worlds, and so if you can, and they can also be cliches, but if you use them in a very knowing way. Yeah. And you can subvert it. So Harvest Moon's a good example of, the first line of that is like, if a heart breaks all alone, does it make a sound? That's a very self-conscious like riff on, if a tree falls in a forest, does it make a sound? Yeah. And then, extending the metaphor, through that. So, there are no rules about what you can't, about in taste. There's just context and, the same lyric or chord or melodic phrase that sounds horrific, like in this position, displaced or put here, or followed by this, or preceded by that, could really work. And that's where arrangers make their money.
Right. Have you noticed, playing with all these different types of musicians, because you play with a lot of jazz musicians, classical musicians, folk musicians, have you noticed kind of patterns in what they're good at, or maybe what they're not so good at?
Yeah. I think so. I mean, good musicians are good musicians for a start, right? And I think someone who's a good musician is someone who's a good listener, And I have tended to find that almost all the jazz musicians I've played with have really good listeners. Have got really good ears.
Is there a difference between having really good ears in a kind of technical sense of being able to identify sound,
I guess I'm
actually
not
being a good listener in a kind of in a spirit way?
Yeah, I guess for me what I mean is like that when you're playing with someone who really listens well, not that they can analyze what's going on in real time like some people can, which is an amazing skill, but rather that they really hear the music. They hear what the music means, not just what the music is doing. Yeah. And that's a massive difference between good musicians and less good musicians. Yeah. I would say that it's a skill that jazz musicians and folk musicians have had to develop.
It's part of their training, right? Yeah. It's part of their training. Whatever their training is, that it's in there somewhere.
And that, particularly if you learn music by ear, and that's one of your fundamental ways of doing it, then I think those people often have a head start when it comes to that, because then they're not just listening for relationships, they're kind of listening for implications. And that makes someone really interesting to work with and play with. I would say that I've been really lucky to play with some great classical musicians. The one thing I'd say is that they're often not so up for taking initiative. They like to be told what to do. Yeah. And that's fine if you like telling people what to do.
Which you do.
Or you know what you want them to do. And the tricky thing is, I've definitely put some classical musicians in situations that they weren't comfortable in by expecting them to come up with stuff. Or expecting them to kind of feel it. Like, it's kind of this sort of thing. Yeah. I remember like reading about Jimi Hendrix's band, and like he never wrote the songs down. Like he would sort of tell them it sort of goes like this. And then they had such a great relationship, and they had such amazing ears in that sense of like really listening to what was being the implication and the meaning of the music, that they just worked the rest out themselves. That's not something that loads of classical musicians I've played with like have. They're really good interpreters of written music. And often when it strays past that, they can feel very out of their comfort zone. And given that I don't write, when I work with musicians, I don't often write the music down. I'm teaching people by ear. I'm teaching people using chord symbols or functional harmony stuff, but I don't write it out like a romantic piano score. As a result, there is an expectation that the musicians will fill in the gaps. And but I guess where I'm at now is And when I think about arrangements, I'm not really thinking about writing arrangements anymore. I'm thinking about choosing the right musician and only expecting them to do what they do.
I see.
So choosing the right person for the right job. And I find so that everyone feels, so I don't expect someone to be like a utility knife that can play samba, they can sort of play reggae, they can sort of play bebop, they can also play Bach. I mean, there's one person I can think of who can just about cover most of those bases. But apart from that, like, I choose Dave Hamblett to play jazz drums because he's amazing at that. And I thought, and if I wanted, and for certain kind of piano music, I want Matt Robinson because he's amazing at that. Or like, or Rhea, like my wife is an amazing recorder player. Like, that's that thing. But I'm not going to say, Rhea, can you come and play like
electric bass? But
the shredding jazz solo on the recorder, like, because that's not her thing.
And it's a terrible
Thank heavens
idea.
not. Thank heavens not.
Okay. Yeah, it's interesting.
But I
because
think
the way we started, like the way we started making music together in the first incarnation of Magic Lantern back in like whenever the hell that was, as we were a quintet with Lucy Relton and Dave Shulman and Ben Morehouse and Phil Stevenson later, and we were sort of writing arrangements. Like I was doing a lot and we were doing it together. Obviously all the songs were your songs, but that was sort of a bit more the opposite of what you just described, wasn't it? Trying to like kind of juice the most out of these 4 or 5 instrument combinations, and actually it was really successful in a way, musically. But you're saying that now you're not so interested in that. You want to like just for this record get this person because you think that combination will just be amazing. Well,
I just think that I think writing arrangements is amazing, and it's a skill I'm really trying to practice and get better at, And there are times when you need the precision that a written arrangement can offer, right? It's the difference between improvising and composition. I mean, I was doing some work with Cleveland Watkins the other day, and he was saying, like, just quoting this thing, which is that like improvisation is composition sped up and composition is improvisation slowed down. But, you need to really slow it down to get really, really granular about some things, which is why that's great. But I've also put musicians in situations where I've expected them to be able to do something that they don't really do very much. Yeah,
and that's uncomfortable, isn't it?
And it's uncomfortable for me, and it's uncomfortable for them.
Yeah.
And even if the results were okay, like
it's better to avoid that.
It's suboptimal.
Yeah.
And like so, there are bass players who are like absolute pocket bass players who, if you want someone to sit on a groove, you get that person.
Yeah.
They're sick.
Yeah.
Or if you want someone to play like, amazing lush, if I want someone to play like classical, like contemporary classical piano, I'm going to ask Eliza McCarthy to do it. Yeah. Because I know tons of amazing piano players, but she is that thing.
Yeah.
And I'm feeling more drawn to people who are more inclined to focus on certain things rather than people who try to do a little bit of everything.
Yeah. This streaming situation and this series here at Sounds and all the streaming things that we've seen pop up all over the place kind of draws into question what is performance. But we've spoken about this before. Is there an element of ritual for you in performing music?
Definitely, yeah. I was talking this just the other day with a storyteller, Wilf Mertens.
Wilf, yeah.
And performance is 100% a ritual. Like, and what's important about that is that it's not just you playing a part. The audience plays their part as well. And as long as you play your part in the ritual, the performance will be okay, regardless of the content. Regardless of whether you play well, in tune, any of those things. If you just play your part in the ritual, which means turning up, not hiding on stage, acknowledging the audience, taking the applause of whatever kind there is, it will be an okay performance. It may not be great, and I love that ritualistic aspect of it, because it helps me focus on being in the moment. And the only performance I'm interested in doing is the performance I'm doing right now in this room to these people, not the bigger gig I'm doing tomorrow, or not like if I've got a cold, or I've screwed up my nails for the guitar, or like I've forgotten the bloody chords to the thing. Like I'm not hiding and saying, well, I'm not really here. A shitty version of me is here.
Right.
Like this is the only performance that matters.
Mm-hmm.
And the more I think about that, the more I'm able to kind of focus on what I'm trying to do with the performance, which is to, offer something to the audience that I hope is useful for them. And thinking about it in those terms helps me avoid collapsing on stage at the prospect of 300 people watching you.
Yeah.
And makes me want to get up and do it again tomorrow.
Yeah. Do you still get nervous playing?
All the time. Every gig. Yeah.
Yeah, me too. Well, actually, I don't get nervous every gig, but I still get nervous.
And I get nervous because I care, because I doubt myself, because I carry around I carry around a long list of the things I need to work on, and the list of the things that I've worked out, I lost that a long time ago. So like, as soon as something gets ticked, I was like, oh, I can do that now. I forget about it.
Yeah.
But I hold on to the fact that, still can't play the guitar very well, or like you still can't sing tune, or like can't play the fucking piano, all that stuff. So, yeah, the performance is an amazing ritual, and the ritualistic element is the same whether it's a gig like this, or whether it's standing up and giving a speech at the wedding. No one teaches you. This Wilf was telling me this. No one teaches you to be quiet when someone clinks the glass. Like you just work that out. Like, and we get that from the body language. We understand it in that sense, and I think the fact that audiences know they've got a part to play and they want you to succeed. That makes me, for the most part, fall in love with every audience I play to. And it's like a drug. Love's a drug. And that's why I want to do it all the time.
That's a perfect place to wrap this up. Thanks, Jamie. Thanks so much.
Pleasure.
It's been great.